Good morning, everyone. Welcome to one more seminar promoted by Bratec. It's a pleasure to be here, and we are very excited to the subject that we're discussing today. My name is Helder Waiandt. I'm a partner of SWOT Action and in USA and Aptec Solutions in Brazil, and I'm board director of Bratec. I'm honored and pleasure to be here today on behalf of Bratec, speaking on behalf of Bratec, and mediating this debate on the such important and in mysterious, like in green zone way topic for the majority of the public, Repetro, and his consequence in the oil gas marketing. Bratec is a chamber of commerce devoted to foster business and friendship among American and Brazilian companies. It's accomplished by providing access for business leaders, business partners, opinion makers, and network opportunities. So Bratec keeps the informed about current events and prepare to seize new opportunities and increase your competitive edge. This year is special for us. We are celebrating our 20th anniversaries, so we're very proud about that. And I ask you, please, to follow us on the social media, and if you're not a member, join us. So for this event, we have a special lineup covering different perspectives regarding Repetro. Repetro is a tax framework established in 1999, a long time ago, so more 22 years, and have received two great upgrades in 2017 and 2019. Bringing new air and new possibility to deal to the oil gas industry. So not only here, the first speaker will be Guilherme Castro. Guilherme Castro is Director Executive at Nicomex, and he's a business administrator specialized in finance and foreign air trade, with more than 50 years experience in logistics customs management to import and export for oil and gas industry. Our second speaker will be Bruno Ferreira. Bruno Ferreira is partner at MAFB, Murayama, Affonso Ferreira, and Brechbühler, Advogados. Bruno Ferreira is a tax attorney with over 15 years of experience in planning, consulting, and litigation, with practice in both international and domestic law. He specializes in oil gas taxations, merger acquisition, and wealth management, among other industry. Speaking in several events and writing, co-writing specialized textbooks. So we have two other guests from panelists from the Mota Advogados. Rita Zanforlin, she is 18 years of experience in projects and corporate lawyer, assisting clients in transition in Brazil and internationally in oil, gas, energy, infrastructure, project finance, and corporate matters. Rita is admitted to practice law both in Brazil and New York, and she certified the conflict mediator for organization and commercial disputes. Last but not least, Julia Mota. Julia Mota is business legal advisor for over 20 years experience in business development, legal strategy, and negotiation. Extensive expertise in corporate law, contracts, administrative law, and public tenders. Particularly experience in oil gas sector, mergers and acquisition process, joint ventures, cross-border transactions, Petrobras bidding process, and conflict management, include arbitration and mediation. These groups have published a guide including all information that we discussed today, called Doing Business in Brazil, and we'll be hosting this publication in your Bratec website for free download, and as well the material that they are displaying here today. So, saying that, thank you very much to attend this event, and I will pass the words to Guilherme and to start our presentation. Guilherme, the floor is yours, please. Starting sharing your presentation and beginning your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elder. Thank you for the introduction. Good morning and good afternoon to all.
Let me think just... you're mute.
You're not hearing me?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So just sharing my screen here. Perfect. So again, thank you, Elder, for the introduction. Also, thank you, Bratec, for the invitation and opportunity to be here today. I'm very happy and honored to be in this event, and also around with my great partners and colleagues, Bruno, Rita, and Julia, and also followed by this very high qualified attendees. So my role here is to speak about Repetro in the customs aspect, which I have my background since 2004. So what I prepare here is this is the agenda I have prepared for this event, which I'm considering 15 minutes of speaking. So I will highlight the most important issues related to Repetro, starting with the Hepato Timeline, and then I will speak about the Hepato SPED, the main issues, the introduction, and some scenarios, which I think it's easier to understand the regime. The same thing I will do to Hepato Industrialization. So I will speak about the introduction and give some scenarios. And I will conclude my presentation with some tips and alerts regarding to custom aspect. Okay. So okay, let's start it. Hopefully, at the end of my presentation, it turns to be a very valuable information to everyone here. And of course, I'll be able to answer any question later. And also, my contacts will be at the end of my presentation, so everyone will be easy to reach me later. Okay, so let's start it. So this is the Repetro timeline, very brief one, very simple one, but it makes easier to everyone to understand that Repetro was inaugurated in 1999 and up to 2017. A large period of this regime was ongoing, and a lot of equipment, the main assets of the oil and gas now in Brazil, was important during this period. I mean, all the drill rigs, all the platforms, all the FPSOs, ROV, and flexible cables, and etc. So this time, almost 20 years of the Repetro was enough for entity public and also private entity private to learn and what is the real need of Repetro in a market aspect and also in the government aspect. So then comes the Repetro SPED, the new regime, with a lot of lesson learned from the last 20 years, and also bringing a new possibility, not just the temporary importation, but also the permanent importation and also a national purchase. So it brought two new options, which the market was willing to have. And to make this possible, especially the permanent purchase, the national permanent purchase, to make this possible, it was a new regime was inaugurated in July 2019, which called Hepato Industrialization. So nowadays we have two Repetro in place, the Repetro SPED and Repetro Industrialization. So each one has a specific function or role, and I will explain in the follow slides to everyone. Before I go ahead, there is a famous sentence which I used to listen every time I participate on event, webinar, workshops about Repetro, is that the Brazilian oil and gas market would be financially impossible without Repetro. And this will, appears to be very easy to understand after the conclusion of my presentation, and also with Bruno and Rita and Julia. Without Repetro, the oil and gas market wouldn't be possible to happen in Brazil. So, okay, moving on. So this is my first, the Repetro SPED introduction. Of course, there are many issues, many requirements about Repetro SPED. It's all clear in the normative, but I try to highlight the most interesting points in aspect of the exporters or of the foreign people and companies. So Repetro means special custom and fiscal regime. SPED, which the new word added to the Repetro, it means digital public office system. So it means that the new control of the inventory of Repetro will be a digital public system and not a private system, which used to be in the last Repetro version. So this is supposed to happen, but until now it was not launched the normative for this system. So we still have like a parallel situation using the last system, the private one, and waiting for the new instruction for the public system. The expiry date is 2040, is the same expiry date for the Hepato Industrialization. We see here actually three levels of beneficiaries of this regime. The main one is the operators, as Petrobras and etc. And also we have the service provided hired by the operator, and also the sub-hired hired of operators. So there is three levels here we might consider. We still have an option. I mean, if anyone here knows the Repetro, the last version, it was all about temporary. So now there is a new option called permanent. So this is the main change from the last Repetro version to this new one. So now it's able to import permanent equipments, and also to buy locally equipments under Repetro regime. Which will give a tax relief at the end of the day. I mean, temporary, you still have the duty-free for federal and state tax. Also, you have a new option for temporary, which is proportional federal duties only. I mean, the state tax is still duty-free, but the federal, you can pay proportionally. I will explain later why it has this option. And the permanent is duty-free federal tax, and you pay only 3% of state tax. So if you compare to the last version of Repetro, this option, it wasn't in place. So all regular importation, the market was paying around 60% of federal and state tax. The lump sum would be 60%. So now it's reduced to only 3%. So it's there is a lot of benefit here. And what is eligible for to be in Repetro? So there are two lists, two annex in the normative, which call Annex 1 and 2. And Annex 1, it's applied for permanent option, and Annex 2 apply for permanent and also temporary. So this is pretty much how to track if your goods, if your products is eligible to be under Repetro SPED, considered as a main asset. You can still import spare parts and also tools, which is related to the main assets. And I will explain in the following slides. So the first scenario I bring is the temporary duty-free, the first one, and I think it's the most convenient one, which has the most suspended duties. And in the practical terms, I see more the importer being the hired or sub-hired companies, and providing service to the operator. And I took an example of Petrobras as an operator. for this slide and the following ones. So it's most common to see the service provider importing something temporary and then using the equipment to provide a service to some operator. This is pretty much the temporary purpose. It's for short and middle term contracts. And as you can see, compared to a regular importation, it's you can save 60% of the on top of CIF value. So it's a lot of saving here. As I mentioned before, it's all around. It's all about Annex 2 for temporary, can be new or used. There is a unit value of $20,000 per item. The second scenario is still temporary, but now it's duties proportionally. So as you can see, the picture here is the same one. And the main difference is the proportional duties for federal. And maybe you can be asking yourself, why are you use proportional duties instead of duty free? So why you come to this option when your product is not related to Annex 1, is not listed to Annex 1 and 2? That's the main reason. So if you still have a product to be imported as a temporary, you can still use Repetro SPED, even not being listed in Annex 2. So in this case, you have to pay the proportional duties for federal. The state is still suspended, but the federal you still has to pay. This the third scenario is a permanent. So here is have the international purchase. So the most common in a practical terms, as I have been seeing, is that the permanent is more for long-term contracts, which normally is the operator who holds this type of contracts, right? So it's more common to see the operators buying as a permanent, using the permanent option for Hepato SPED. But you still can have this, the hired service provider and also the sub-hired service provider importing as a permanent, and then using the equipment to provide a service to the operator. Also, the fourth scenario is still permanent, and but in this case, it's a national purchase. So you still have you can see the manufacturer chain here, providing and manufacturing some specific good, and then Petrobras as the final operator, final buyer, buying the equipment from the final manufacturer and only paying 3% of the state tax. So this is pretty much what the permanent options allows to the operators or also to the service provider to use. Okay. Of course, you're gonna have these slides, so it's gonna be easy to understand better the scenarios, reading the table here. And anyway, I'll be also open to answer new questions around these scenarios. Okay. So moving to the Repetro industrialization, what we have here is first of all, industrialization in Brazil, it means we have 5 types of industrialization. So we can consider transformation, improvement, assembly, packaging, renewal, and renewal. So this is the 5 types of manufacturing. So if you can do any type of this industrialization, you can be classified as a manufacturer. And if anyone here knows about the drawback, are familiar with the drawback regime in Brazil, Repetro industrialization is pretty much similar. But the main difference is that drawbacks at the end of the process, you have to export the final product. And Repetro industrialization, you don't export, you only sell locally, and you sell to someone who has the Repetro SPED license. As I mentioned before, the expiry date is 2040. We see here 2 levels of beneficiaries. So there is the final manufacturer and the intermediary manufacturer. Follow and what is can be what you can sell after you industrialize. So what is eligible for sale is everything listed on Annex 1 and 2 as a permanent option to the Repetro SPED beneficiary. So they were allowed to buy something related to enlisted in Annex 1 and 2. So the manufacturer in Brazil, if they manufacture something less in Annex 1 and 2, they are capable to be under Repetro Industrialization regime. Also, the spare parts and tools, which are related to Annex 1 and 2, is able to be manufactured in Brazil as well. What kind of incomes, material incomes, the manufacturers under Repetro Industrialization can buy? Basically are raw material, intermediate products, and packing material. And the tax benefit is everything duty-free. The whole manufacturing chain is duty-free. So this is the best we can have here. The scenario is pretty much simple. This is the only one, and you can realize that you can figure out that's the same picture of the scenario 4 of the Repetro SPED. But the main difference here is the point of view. So we are looking here on behalf of the manufacturer in Brazil. So they have a maximum of 24 months to industrialize the equipment and sell to the operator. Also, as I explained, can be Annex 1 and 2. This is the potential saving for if you are international purchase or if you buy national purchase. This is pretty much the income, the raw material, the intermediate products, and the packing. So this is a lot of saving that the manufacturer, the intermediary, or the final manufacturer can have, and consequently sell cheaper products to the operator, to the market. So this is the main intention behind this regime. Going to the end of my presentation, this is a very common sentence in the customs in Brazil. It's better to waste days at origin than get the goods stuck in custom at destination. And I pick six. I pick 5 tips and alerts to share with everyone. So the first one, all of Repetro shipments, import and export, are custom inspected. So there is no green channel. So you must keep in mind that every Repetro shipment, it will be inspected by customs. Also, custom inspection can take 2 to 5 days to be concluded. This is Rio de Janeiro average based in Nicomex experience. Also, the Annex 1 and 2 is not easily updated. It depends on Congress to vote. This is something very important to highlight here. And it's kind of a break for innovation in the market. Because if you launch a new product and this product is not listed on Annex 1 and 2, the Brazilian companies can't import under Repetro, and this is a very interesting thing to be solved by the government. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Also, there are heavy penalties applied for not complying with the rules of the regime. And at the end, you have to make sure all paperwork requirements are issued and done prior to the shipment. This is the easier way to skip any problem in Brazil. This is how Nicomex can be helpful in the process related to importation and exportation regarding to Repetro or regular operation. So this is pretty much what Nicomex does. We are a custom broker and also a freight forwarder, so we can deal with any matter related to importation and exportation. So this is pretty much what I have here. It's already 17 minutes, so 2 minutes late. Thank you again for this time and this opportunity. I'll be open for questions at the end of this webinar. So back to Bratek, Elder.
Thank you very much for your remarks, Guilherme. It was very, very, very helpful, and we got a lot of information to digest. So we can see that we have a lot of ways to deal with this Repetro, and this industrialization side of the law. It's very interesting. So it's new, and I can see a lot of companies using this opportunity to doing a more competitive business in Brazil and bring more business to Brazil. Thank you very much. So following our program here, I'm inviting Bruno Ferreira to talk a little bit about the all tax regulation and the consequence. So Bruno, thank you very much to be part of this event, and the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to speak. I saw the list of attendees and noticed a few friends, a few clients. It's good to have you all here. So I had access beforehand to Guilherme's presentation, so I decided to shorten mine and go straight up to the main points. Usually when I meet a client for a first discussion about these, we have a 2-hour meeting, and most of the times it's not enough. So let's see how we can wrap this up in 15 minutes. Well, initially I'm making a historical context, but from a tax perspective of what Guilherme just said, which is necessary from what I'm going to discuss. Well, basically in the 90s, we had the reduction to zero of the withholding income tax on charter hire payments, and also the creation of Repetro, which allowed only the temporary import of assets is exempt from taxation. Brazilians are very creative when it comes to tax efficiency, so we created a 3-party agreement. Basically, a local Brazilian operator chartered in a vessel from a foreign ship owner and hired a local entity, usually a subsidiary from this foreign ship owner, in this 3-party agreement, which was still optimized for tax efficiency, since charter hires are subject to zero tax. I'm still not on my slide, so I'm just making this introduction. So we had these split structures, which most of you are familiar with, some of you are still not, but these structures, which are clear and transparent, in my opinion, were questioned by the Federal Revenue Office. They understood these were abusive structures, so they have audited and assessed local service renders for multiple reasons. They had accumulated, some of them had accumulated losses over the years, since the split portion was not very fairly balanced. But the Federal Revenue Office also assessed the operators who have multi-billionaire disputes. They understood that simple charter agreements were actually service imports. And then we have a heavy taxation on top of it, and the penalties. So this created a huge noise in the market. The law was amended after a lot of pressure and fixed thresholds for these split structures, which are basically a maximum percentage that can be attributable to charter payments. Whatever exceeds this amount is subject to taxation, and this has been working. This mitigates the risk of the structure itself being considered as abusive, but companies still have to face the dispute with the IRS of whether these are services or these are charter contracts. So as I said, the split structures are still most efficient, but some local companies prefer to price how much would a local contract cost, instead of having a year contingency. Imagine a 5-year drill contract. I can have 5 years of contingency subject to being charged by the IRS, or should I just contract my supplier locally, which will result in a small increase in taxation? Not that small, but still an increase in taxation, but elimination of these risks. So now we go to the first slide, because I am not saying we have entirely changed the bid structures, no, but we have been seeing quite a few bids in which a single contract is executed with a local entity. Also some bids that were generally for international supply of goods, and then those bids are requiring a local entity to be established. So based off of these I don't know if this is a trend. I don't know if this change in contracting structures will be made solely for certain items, but what we can do is follow up how these go and prepare, as the consequences are different. Now going to the first slide. As I mentioned, some of these bids are requiring an entity to be incorporated in Brazil. We can now have branches or a subsidiary. Julia and Rita will discuss this through. And also for maintenance and other services to be rendered. And in some bids, we have a single contract executed with this Brazilian entity. In these cases, it's pretty much mandatory that we use the benefits that Guilherme mentioned regarding the import of assets, of actually consumables and parts and spare parts that usually were not reached by original Repetro, but now are, which these purchases can be made exempt from taxes, except for the ICMS, which is a state tax. I'm gonna specify later. And we have Repetro Industrialization, which allows local entities to purchase, either imported or from local suppliers, items, parts, and pieces, exempt from federal taxes, as long as they are sold to a Repetro beneficiary. In some, of course, there are lots of more details, but just summarizing. Important to mention that industrialization, which is the name of the regime, has a much broader meaning than simply a manufacturer, according to Brazilian law and precedents. We had so many cases in the past in which the federal tax authorities aiming at charging one specific tax declared that assemblage and other similar activities were triggering events of the IPI, excise tax. I'm discussing this later, but we need to make a case-by-case analysis in these situations in which the local supplier will manufacture or assemble, or what is exactly this company will do or can it do, or how the contract treats this, to see if the company can benefit from this regimen, which is really interesting. And last, as a final note, the rendering of services is not directly affected by Repetro tax reliefs. This has been something the market has been asking, but still not there directly. Indirect effects may happen, but the Repetro is not aiming at this point. So we can go to the next one now, slide. And then just a simple number presentation of how we have a regular import and a Repetro import. Basically a case of a local entity purchasing consumable spare parts from a foreign supplier, it can be a affiliated company or not, and rendering services to a Brazilian client. Well, when you purchase these items for a regular import, you have the import duty, with rate ranges depending on NASH, which is Harmonized System Classification Code, from 6 to 14 average. We can have X tariffs reducing it to 0 to 4. It's a cost. We have the IPI, which is an excise tax, also based off of Harmonized Code classification. This is also a cost for a service render. We have PS and COFINS welfare federal contributions, fully recoverable, so it's a cash flow. Some items that you import have an extra 1%, which is not recoverable. And we have the ICMS, which is state tax, similar to a VAT. We have in Rio 19% base rate plus cross up, comes down to that approximated rate. And also the above taxes are included in this calculation base. So this is a heavy burden. Meanwhile, if you import these parts, consumables, while using Repetro SPAD, these taxes are mostly reduced to 0, except for the ICMS, which you pay 3%, and in Rio have a 1.5 approximate surcharge. And this is not a recoverable tax. This is a different ICMS from what they usually have. This 1.5% can be challenged. We still wait for a decision from superior courts, but it's questionable. And this is ideal for service contracts. However, if you need to sell one of these imported items to your client, this regime shouldn't work. Well, it works, but it's not optimal. We have been consulted about this multiple times in the last month. companies that render services, but also need to sell some items, wanted to sell some items that were imported with these benefits, and these operations not covered by any exemption. So this is not ideal. In these cases, it's better off to run numbers and check whether regular imports or these specific benefits should be used, because sometimes it may be cheaper to make a regular import as you take lots of credits. And then we can go to the next one. Then a simple example for Repetro Industrialization. You have a local entity purchasing inputs, parts, items to be assembled, or orders to be verified in a case by case. They can purchase them locally or import them with zero taxation. Taxation is fully deferred for when the items are sold to client. We have still a 0% federal tax charge and only the ICMS. And of course, over the profits, we do have regular corporate taxes, which are plannable, but well, this is important. So one comment I make, the states are still not ready for this regime to be used. We have a few clients that have applied for this for federal taxes, have been granted the regime. We have clients that have applied this in the state of Rio, for instance, for 6 months, and still waiting for a reply. State says they still need to rule how ancillary obligations will run for this, but well, we still gotta wait for now. Okay, we can go to the next one. So before I make these comments, general comments, basically, when you have a contract that needs to be made with a Brazilian entity, this shifts completely your planning when compared to international supply. You make an international supply, you don't have to worry about anything. Your client in Brazil will take care of all taxes. If you need to set up a local entity, well, from a tax perspective, this may not be as costly as some may think, as you can use Repetro Industrialization and optimize your tax effects in Brazil. On top of these, of the regimes and their benefits, which are pretty much straightforward, and especially on these cases where you have a contract executed in Brazil, one single contract, or even for split contracts, which are still out there. These notes I understand to be important. First one, regarding transfer price, especially in single contracts. Well, Brazil has mandatory transfer pricing rules, similar but not identical to what we have abroad, but here companies are entitled to choose from one of the methods set forth by law. They can choose the cheapest one. This is settled. Transfer pricing teams were created by the Federal Revenue Office, so we have been notice of several assessments. So this is definitely a matter to be addressed. We also have thin cap rules, which most of you are familiar with. These are important for funding and general tax purposes, especially you need to fund your local entity. You need to plan for that. Also, interest on equity is important tool to tax planning. This is something we have in Brazil, which allows a company to pay interest to its shareholder. This interest is fully deductible from regular tax purposes, resulting in a 34% reduction, while it's taxed only at 15%, so we have a gain out of that. Intercompany transactions are also key. They are inevitable. Brazilian will buy products, will charter vessels, will buy consumables from other companies, so we have intercompany transactions all the time. Intercompany service transactions are really important because there's a very heavy tax burden on them. It can amount up to 45% in some cases. Brazil has a limited network of treaties to avoid double taxation, so the correct use of these treaties, when applicable, may also provide relevant saving. And as I mentioned before, Brazilian Federal Revenue Office has been auditing several companies in this industry over the past few years from multiple reasons, but lots of these assessments, especially in local service renders, were related to intercompany transactions. So the Brazilian company rendered services to a foreign company, whether logistics, personnel, procurement, maintenance, painting, buying some items, and they didn't have enough compliance over that. They didn't book what kind of services were rendered. They didn't have a report of what was exactly done, or items or cost breakdown. So the IRS approached so many of these companies. We're defending so many of them because the IRS simply understood that this was not a service render, actually an export of services. The beneficiary of these services should be the Brazilian client and not an external company. So they charged. They reclassified these revenues as local, charged 5 years of taxation with penalties, 75, in some cases 150%. So last comment, the IRS provides a blacklist of jurisdictions. We have tax havens, which are blacklist. We have privileged tax regimes, which we call a gray list. We have made aggravated taxation when transactions are made with these companies. So when you set up your structure, this is also something to pay attention to. So mixed usage of Repetro benefits, paying attention to all these items. These are really important in Brazil. Tax authorities are very eager to collect taxes. So the better you do your homework, you prevent any charges. So this will be my next one, my last one. I'm just thanking you all for joining again, and I'll be available for questions later on.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you for your remarks. Was very delightful, especially the examples that you brought to us with numbers. So it's much easier to see the pictures when you see numbers like that. So thank you very much. And see the compliance as well applied for that. It's very helpful to understand the framework and the legal impact. Not only tax, but legal impact in all these transactions. Thank you very much for that. So we have here in our webinar Q&A section. So you have, if you want to send question for our panelists, please use this Q&A button that you have in the bottom of your Zoom link. And if you are following us at YouTube, please, you can use the chat. We try to manage the chat as well. So we have both ways to bring some questions to the panelists, and we already have popping up some good questions here. So looking forward to get these answers. But now I have two special guests, panelists to deliver these remarks for us. Rita Zanforlin and Julia Mota. Please, I ask you to keep in 15 minutes to allow the participants interact with us, deliver some questions. So, Julia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elder. We're going to start with Rita, and we're going to be switching to talk about our part here, which is going to be more related to contracts and corporate structure. Okay. Thank you for the organization. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Just a second. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So Rita, you can start. Rita?
Hi. No, thank you. Well, let's start. Thank you, Elder and Bratec for hosting this event. Very happy to be here. Good morning to the other speakers. It's an honor to be sharing this event with you and to everyone that is here with us today. We just heard this very excellent presentations by Guilherme and Bruno that cover the main characteristics of both regimes, the Repetro SPED regime and the Repetro Industrialization regime. And they covered all these customs implications and tax benefits and the characteristics. And what Julia and I will be talking about now is about the contracts and the business structure for necessary to implement an operation under the Repetro. So yes, this the Repetro SPED. So the covered operation products beneficiary. I'm not going into details on that. They already covered that with much more details and information. And the contracts that are necessary to make this work in practice is a final sale of a foreign or Brazilian equipment to a beneficiary of the regime, which is an oil company, or a lease of a foreign equipment to a beneficiary of the regime, which is, as Bruno mentioned, is usually associated with services by a Brazilian company. So when we're talking about Repetro SPED, we're talking with contracts for sale or lease or services and a Brazilian entity that is the service provider. And then when we are talking about the Repetro Industrialization, the next slide, what we see is that a final sale, there has to be a Brazilian manufacturing company in Brazil, and the contract is a final sale of the manufactured item to a beneficiary of the Repetro SPED regime, the oil company and its suppliers. So basically then here we're talking about the Brazilian company, the manufacturer, and the contracts to supply, to sell the goods to the oil company. So we're dividing our presentation in these two main aspects. We're talking about the contracts, the procurement aspect, and the establishment of a Brazilian company. I will pass now to Julia, who will discuss in more details the contract aspect, and I come back later to talk a little bit about the aspects of a Brazilian company, some general overview on that. Julia,
Julia, please unmute yourself, please.
Okay. Rita mentioned that, and the other panelists have mentioned about the use of Repetro requires a certain structure, contract structure and corporate structure. You can use Repetro if you have a contract with an oil company in Brazil. Today, we have in Brazil several majors, several oil companies, and you have Petrobras. You can also benefit from Repetro if you have a contract with a subcontractor or a main contractor or a subcontractor of a subcontractor. So you still need a contract with one company that has a contract with an oil operator, okay? So those are the Repetro beneficiaries. Petrobras is still the main client, the main company to whom you're gonna provide services and goods in Brazil, because they procure the majority of the goods and services in Brazil still today. They are a state company and they are subject to a specific procurement process because they are under the state public procurement law. So Petrobras runs national bids and international bids. In general, when Petrobras organizes international bid, it is required that you have a branch in Brazil. You don't need to register the branch in Brazil, but you at least you need an authorization to have a branch in Brazil. And this process is consists of applying before the Brazilian government to obtain an authorization according to the regulation 77 from updated last year. And Petrobras runs a public bid in general. Do you see my screen where I mentioned public Petrobras bid, etc.? Because I have an issue here in my screen. Okay, so in general, Petrobras runs public bids. It means that any company can participate to the bid. You don't need to be invited. So the bids are organized through the Petronet website. So I invite you to take a look at the Petronet website afterwards and see. You have lots of information about Petrobras procurement. You have Petrobras contracts templates over there. So you can find a lot of information in this website. But Petrobras can also run a private bid. If Petrobras is the leader of a consortium with other oil companies, they can procure the goods and services by means of a private bid. In any case, it's very important that you apply to become a vendor. It means that you have to apply at Petronet website to become a Petrobras supplier. Because if you become a Petrobras supplier, you can receive the bid invitations through email. You don't need to be checking that every day for your products and services bids. You can receive the bid invitations through your email. So it's very important to get registered. I'm going to talk a little bit about some critical aspects in Petrobras contracts you got to be aware. Because when you participate to a bid, you receive the bid documents with everything, all the documents, including the contract. So it means that if you're interested in providing services to Petrobras, you can already go to Petronet webpage and check the templates. Now, you have to be careful. When the bid is launched, you make a full analysis of the whole bid documents. And if you have anything that you want to change, anything that you want to challenge because you don't agree, because you think it's not fair or not reasonable, you can do that. But you can only do that before the bid. Because after you are awarded the bid, nothing can be changed. So it's very common that it happens that I have the clients that participate to bids and they say, okay, now we're going to negotiate with Petrobras. So no way, you cannot negotiate with Petrobras after the bid is awarded. It's forbidden. Nothing can be amended after the bid is awarded. And in terms of Petrobras standard contract for services, when you provide a service to Petrobras, sometimes it includes, the service requires an equipment. You need to bring to Brazil your equipment to provide the services. So that's where you can benefit from Repetro. And then the contract with Petrobras provides that the equipment that they're going to need to provide the service in Brazil must be imported according to you have to apply under the special customs regime, which is the Repetro. So it's very important that you understand the Repetro, how you can apply for the Repetro, how you can import on the Repetro, because once you participate to a bid with Petrobras, you have to make your price. And how can you make your price if you don't know how much of benefits you're going to have when you import your equipment to Brazil on the Repetro? So it's very important that you make all these analysis beforehand, before getting to your price. So you're going to know exactly how much tax you're going to pay and how much you're going to propose to Petrobras. Because if you don't do that, your competitor is going to do that, and they're going to have a better price than yourself, than your company. So you're not going to be competitive. So that's why it's very important to understand Repetro before you make your price. And that's the same if you're selling goods to Petrobras that maybe benefit from the Repetro regime. You got to make these calculations beforehand. So this is just a small, touch of information about the Petrobras system with in light of Repetro. So Rita is going to talk now about the corporate structures that you're going to may be required if you wish to benefit from Repetro industrialization.
Thank you, Julia. As I mentioned before, to create a Repetro operation, we need Brazilian entity. If it's a Repetro industrialization, there has to be a manufacturing facility in Brazil, and in some cases also a service provider in Brazil as well, depending on requirements of the contractors, the oil companies, and so on. So these are the main two Brazilian entities involved in a Repetro operation. And the next slide, I have this very, very, very challenging task of covering some, Julia, next slide. Thank you. To cover these three, I choose three topics that are key elements for a new Brazilian company coming into Brazil. And I'm going to talk very, very briefly on each of them, just some main ideas that I think it's important that everyone is aware when starting, when opening a Brazilian company. So the first one is the corporate structure, whether starting a subsidiary or a branch. Julia mentioned a little bit about the requirement to open a branch by Petrobras in some cases, and Bruno also mentioned that. And the main issue about the branch is that it requires federal approval, federal government approval, and it involves the publication of the financial statements of the Brazilian branch, and sometimes also publication of the statements and financial documents of the main company abroad, if that is required abroad. So there is a heavy and sometimes not very clear requirements and how to open the branch in Brazil. And the main issue also in relation to liability, since the branch is the same corporate entity as the main company abroad. So every obligation that is assumed by the branch is also direct obligation of the foreign main parent. So this is something that has to be taken into consideration. When you're talking about the subsidiary, a Brazilian company, and Brazil has the types of the corporate types as most other jurisdictions, and a corporation or a limited liability company will allow to have a subsidiary with one only shareholder or quota holder, a wholly owned subsidiary, which may be very good when you don't have a second partner to be in the Brazilian company. There is segregated liability, since the company in Brazil is a different legal entity than the company abroad. However, we see very often that contractors, Petrobras and other oil companies may require corporate guarantee from the parents if the local entity has not financial capability. So that's not uncommon to happen. And so these are some of the ideas that to keep in mind whether opening a subsidiary or a branch. In relation to anti-corruption compliance, Brazilian law established the liability of the legal entity for corruption by managers and by personal contractors if the corruption act is in benefit of the company, and there are heavy penalties for that, money penalties, administrative penalties, and also judicial penalties that can lead up to suspension of activities and termination of the company. Anti-corruption programs and an effective code of conduct is not a legal requirement. However, authorities take into consideration whether the company has a robust code of conduct and whistleblower practices and anti-corruption program to reduce the penalties. So if the company is doing a good job and trying to avoid corruption practices, that is taken into consideration and reduced the penalty of that, although there's no clear parameters for that. But that's in the law. And also another thing to consider is that in relation to anti-corruption programs, most often also contractors also require companies to have anti-corruption programs, and probably also your parent company will require you to have a anti-corruption program here in Brazil, but there may be some need to adequate both programs, the local program with the contractor program, with the parent company program. So this is something also to be kept in mind. And finally, in relation to data privacy, the law came in effect in September last year, and the aim is to bring Brazil to the same legal standard of international laws on this subject. Besides the obligation to treat personal data in secrecy and rights to data subjects to access to correct info and so on, companies may be also required to submit reports to the Data Protection Authority on how they treat personal data and the flows of personal data. So this is all what we have been talking about, the adequacy to the law, and that companies need to start thinking about. The administrative penalties by the Data Protection Authority are not yet in force. It's going to be enforced in August this year. However, civil liability is already is already in force since the law is already in force. So keeping a good eye and looking at how to comply with the obligation of the law, that's something that is already in force and should be taken into consideration. So these were this is very, very, very briefly just some main aspects, and we are going to be open for questions now. And thank you all for being here with us. It was a pleasure to speak. Julia, the next slide has our contact also information, Julia and I, and feel free to contact us, some information about the firm, and all this material will also be available for you later on. And thank you. Elder, I pass the word back to you.
Thank you very much, Rita. Thank you very much, Julia. It's very interesting to see how to plan the structure in Brazil and the contracts in Brazil under the Repetro spotlight, especially when you see contract signing and pushing the responsibility to the contractor to handle the repatriation or to re-export the goods. It could be a problem in the future. So it's very, very helpful tip to take a look deeply in this aspect before you sign any contracts, not only Petrobras, but any player in Brazil. So that I think that is very interesting. And regarding the corporation structure, is very interesting to see these tax aspect impacting this decision as well. So thank you very much for your remarks. So we have some question here and have few minutes to answer that. So I ask you, the panelists, to be very short in the answers. So I have the first question that I will leave to you guys will be coming. Let's say, to have two questions in one. One comes from the YouTube channel, another one from the chat here. And it's talking about the contract and services to Petrobras. And if Repetro is applicable to for FPSOs, including hull conversions. And I'd like to add that regarding the this commissioning as well. So how the commissioning could be affect under Repetro rules. So how can apply Repetro rules under the commission as well phase right now in Brazil, and it should be considered to the future in terms of the mobilization of new contracts in Brazil. So I pass that to Julia and to Guilherme, please.
So can I proceed?
Please.
Yes, you can proceed. I cannot open my video. You can proceed, Guilherme.
Okay. So the first question is about the from YouTube. If Repetro applies for FPSO, definitely applies for sure. It's listed on Annex 1, but there is an exemption on the normative that says that FPSO and some platform list on Annex 1, it applies for temporary as well. So FPSO can be import under temporary and also permanent purpose. So FPSO is totally applicable for Repetro. Regarding rule conversion, I'm not sure if applies under Repetro SPED or Repetro Industrialization. It seems to me more Repetro Industrialization, but I'm not sure at all what it's rule conversion is a type of industrialization or it's a service. I'm not sure. So maybe Bruno or Julio or Rita can complement this answer. But the first one is totally capable to use FPSO under Repetro. The second one was regarding decommission, right? So as far as I understand, decommission is a part of development of the oil field. It's the end of the process of development. So Repetro SPED, it's the range of Repetro SPED is for exploration, production, and development of oil fields of onshore and offshore. So decommission, it's in my opinion, and as far as I've been hearing from the market, is a part of development activity. So it must be applicable for Repetro. Otherwise, I mean, decommissioning activities would be financially impossible to happen. So I'm not sure if I have a very clear answer. I mean, legal answer that can support, but I will try to find something on the website, on the internet, and I can send later to everyone
Bruno,
here.
maybe Bruno can. Bruno, would you like to say something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Next question, Elder.
Okay, let's take another question here. I have another one here regarding business model or better model of structure here. It goes to Bruno. Can you say there is then a better model or structure to carry out or serve contracts in Brazil? There is a better way to do that?
Well, there are different models to adapt and use based off of what your client is setting up in the bid. The bid is the first law, and then we have how to set up legal entity in Brazil or not. Split contracts are still effective. So we cannot say, okay, you want to do business in Brazil, you should do it this way. No, we have to look at the details, how the bid is set up. And if this question is made by who sets up the bid, by the operator, we have to look at what he intends to. They have other reasons other than taxes when set up a structure, but these can always be optimized. So, well, yeah, there's no fixed model we should run.
Yeah, just a comment that maybe I can help Bruno, that when you analyze the tax impact of your operation, it's very important, but you also have to analyze liabilities. Sometimes the companies have decide to set up a company in Brazil, a subsidiary in Brazil, or a branch in Brazil, and a subsidiary can work as a wall in terms of liability. So it's very common that a company would set up a subsidiary in Brazil to avoid that any liabilities related to tax or labor or anything reaches the head office. So you have to consider tax, liabilities. You have to consider also your client. Do your client wants to buy local, or do your clients want to buy abroad? So there are several aspects that must be considered when setting up your business in Brazil. not only tax, not only.
Yeah, always.
Yeah, going in the same direction. I know that you have an answer already here in the chat, but to make it more public, so I have the question here as already answered to Jim Shamnes regarding if the Brazilian company is service provider to oil and gas companies using temporary contracts, but no one ongoing contract. Is the service provider eligible to use Repetro to import equipment or provision of those services? Bruno, we have starting to answer that. Can you put it more public, please?
The initial portion of your question, please, if you can just repeat, Elder. Just
yeah, if a Brazilian company is service provider to oil gas companies using temporary contracts, but no one ongoing contract. Is the service provider eligible to use Repetro to import equipment for provision those service?
Well, I have replied him. We can analyze exactly what they intend to do, but you can have items temporarily imported in Brazil to be ready for spot contracts or to be ready for when there's a bid ongoing. So yes, it's feasible for certain items, but has some costs as well.
Bruno, especially drill rigs and platforms, there is an exemption on the legislation allowing to import before you get the contract. Also, once you have an equipment imported in Brazil under Repetro, you have a clause that allows you to add an extra 6 months plus 6 months for demobilization. So once you end your contract, you still can keep the equipment for at least 12 months under demobilization clause, you know. So this is another option to keep. But if you decide to import something under Repetro and temporary, at the gate of the custom office, you might present the service contract and also the loan agreement. So this is basically to admit something under temporary in Repetro regime.
He can do in this case, if he doesn't have a contract with an oil operator, he can have a temporary admission between its company in Brazil, its subsidiary in Brazil, and the head office, a leasing contract, for instance. So there are some ways, like Bruno said, to organize this tax plan.
This is also news from the new Repetro. We couldn't do this as clearly before.
Okay, so I have here, actually I have several questions here, but I will deliver one more comments from the YouTube channel. And then we go to the close remarks because we are almost finishing our window time here. It's from Rosângela Lourenço, says that looks like Rio de Janeiro state applies an additional tax called FOT for Repetro Industrialization.
Elder?
Elder congelou.
Rio de Janeiro state.
Okay, Elder, you froze for a couple seconds. We missed your question.
Sorry, the question is, looks like the Rio de Janeiro state applies an additional tax called FOT for Repetro industrialization process. Are you aware about that? Can you explain about that?
Yes, this is the 1.5% that I added in the numbers. But the 1.5%, I also had a question about that. Well, basically, it's a final round number, but what comes behind it is this that Rio de Janeiro state, with its finances collapsing, stated this long time ago, changed its name, so they keep doing this. Companies are required to deposit a 10% over the difference between how much ICMS they would have paid normally and how much they paid after using the tax benefit. So this spread, the company keeps 90% of it and 10% has to be deposited to the state. This comes down in most cases to around 1.5%. And this is arguable, but should be treated as an upside, being conservative.
Okay, guys, I think we are 1 minute ahead of our time planned. I'd like to thank you for that. And I think Repetro, when I start to work in this industry in the beginning of 90s, so when you start to do the all control to apply Repetro, so it was even the law helping us a lot, but it was a nightmare to control the inventory, to do everything in 90s. So after our RP and digitalization, we easier to control that. We can see a lot of benefits using this special regime. And but we need to be aware what you're doing since the beginning. So I can one the takeaway that I have here, it's having the planning, tax planning with the contract, see what the contract says, how to deal with the contracts, and having this tax plan well done could put you in very advantageous position in terms of cost, and of course avoiding consequences, penalties and fines later on when you need to finishing this temporary regime and put make the final decision regarding the goods that you have using under these systems. So I'm very glad that you had this conversation today. And for all of you that attend us, I'm really appreciate your time here. And thank you very much, Guilherme. Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you very much, Julia and Rita, for your time here today. Thank you very much for the team Bratec has put this together, and Cecilia, Daniel, everybody has worked with us doing this seminar today. And we will have this material that the panelists have presented here today in our website, and we add as well one guide that was prepared for them, and doing more, delivering more details about this regulation, the aspects. So feel free to go to website, Bratec website, and download this material from tomorrow, including the video. And if you're not a member, please consider to join us. Bratec is turning 20 years, 20th anniversary this year. Very proud about that. We are a very, very active Chamber of Commerce, and need you to help us to make it stronger and longer. So thank you very much for you all, and stay tuned for the next event. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.